This is episode number 437 of WPwatercooler, content creation for a WordPress brand. I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me at Jason Tucker at the Simeon Rodeo on Mastodon, and you can also find me on my website.
And y'all know who it is. It's your boy Jason Cosper, aka Fat Molo Mike, back at it again on the world's most influential WordPress podcast.
Speaking of podcasts, go over to Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google, Spotify, and you can even go hang out with us on Discord. Hey, how's it going?
Hey!
We have a friend on the show. How's it going, Doc?
Howdy, y'all. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, Jason, it's great meeting you. And we spent half an hour talking about old video game phones and Engage and side talking. We're good. We're all caught up.
We're all caught up. Cosper, you wanna give us a quick little intro?
Well, I was actually going to let Doc do the talking.
Yeah.
One of my former coworkers over at WP Engine, known Doc for a few years now, and he has really been doing a great job with the podcast that he's running over there. Doc, why don't you tell the audience a little about yourself?
Yeah, actually, I want to say that it's good to see you again, and it was really fun reading the description y'all had. You had a really good bio. I think I'm just going to copy paste your bio. It mentioned that I used to do radio and stuff, things that I don't even remember talking about before. But yeah, I have been working with WP Engine for 7 years on the Torque Mag team. So it's really just been kind of like the two of us for the most part working on that. And it is WP Engine is our employer, and we are kind of our own standalone thing, sort of like I'm sure a lot of people are from a WP Tavern, very similar relationship there. And as such, I previously would go to WordCamps as kind of like a big part of my job and just try to do as many interviews as possible, see if I could get like 10 to 20 interviews at each WordCamp and have them up before the WordCamp was even over. And now it's kind of switched to doing live streams every Wednesday on our YouTube channel. And I just recently took over Press This, which is a WP Engine podcast that David Vogelpohl used to run and was originally started by Joost de Valk. So those are kind of what I'm working on now.
Great.
That's cool.
Yeah. So you have, while you've worked primarily on Torque, do you ever get pulled into WP Engine, like writing and stuff like that occasionally, like blog posts there, or do you just mainly like Docs 24/7 is Torque?
I would say 99% of the stuff I do is Torque, and every now and then, they'll maybe ask for opinions or ask for art because I do drawings and stuff. So every now and then I'll do that stuff. Quite often, my style is very unique and not necessarily something that fits with the brand. So oftentimes they kind of learn not to not to rely on me unless they want something that looks like it, was drawn by like a child. But the editor of Torque, Emily, I'd say she does go back and forth a little more. Like she kind of wears, I think we both kind of feel like we wear these hats. And when we're doing Torque stuff, we try to be very ambiguous and, not really talk about the brand from the perspective of working for WP Engine, but just kind of covering it as news and covering everything else the same way. But then, you get used to kind of like putting on that hat and you say, okay, now it's time to kind of write copy for the site, stuff like that. And I think that she does help a lot with that, mostly as kind of like an editor rather than writing the copy.
Yeah, that makes sense. How do you approach that content that you're writing? Is there guidelines around it, or is there some kind of like how you should be approaching the content for, do you have to mention the brand? Do you have to mention any of those sorts of things? And then how do you feel like you try to do that, while you're doing your content creation?
Well, when they first hired me, they made it quite clear that this is its own thing. It's not meant to be like a commercial for WP Engine. And, I've had several, I've been there for so long that we've had several people kind of at WP Engine who maybe weren't familiar with that. And every now and then we just kind of like remind them like, hey, we're not an extension of your marketing. We try to be ambiguous. If anything, the way that we tend to filter ourselves, I would say Emily and I are maybe less likely to talk about WP Engine stuff sometimes because we're trying to be a little bit more ambiguous. That's just the way it feels to me. Like it very much feels like we are trying to always work on our reputation of being hopefully perceived as open and neutral. And so sometimes when we are, covering something like a press release or something happens with Genesis or whatever, I think sometimes we're even maybe nervous about sharing it unless we feel like it's really newsworthy. I think just to kind of go along with that, quite often you'll see stuff appear on WP Tavern that we didn't even mention because we were like, oh, if we write that, will it be? So it's a self-censoring fear maybe that if we cover stuff too much, it might hurt our reputation. So I think if anything, we sometimes tend to try to shy away from it unless we're like, no, this is like something that would be also covered on any other blog. That's how we try to think about it.
Yeah, because I've seen other brands, not in the WordPress space, but just outside of it, that try to either do a publication or they try to do something that it may just be like news and noteworthy type content, but they always try to like get their brand mentioned in it at some point, and it seems like they're just kind of shoehorning it in, and it feels dirty, and it's kind of just like, oh, what's going on with this? I appreciate what you're saying here, where you're to the point where you're almost not trying to mention any of the things that your company is working for or working on yet. I don't know. That's a tough one. I don't know how you guys balance that. But apparently you are, and you're doing a good job of it. I remember when Torque was first mentioned, I think it was at WordCamp San Francisco. It was like the last one or second to last one or something. And they did a whole thing about it. I was just like, oh, wow, this is going to be an interesting thing. I'm very curious how, a publication like this is going to work. And it sounds like, I mean, for the years that you guys have been doing it, I've linked to your stuff in show notes that we've done and things like that. And I don't know, I love the approach that you're taking with this. That's really, really cool.
Well, the one thing we never have to worry about is because we tend to keep things very positive. We never really have to worry about like, oh, they're only saying these things about a different company because it's a different company. Like we're not, we're just overall trying to spread good vibes. So at least that's been super easy. We never, talk about like negative stories with other folks and then worry about how we're perceived because of the owners of us. That's one of those things that, we watch WP Tavern do, and we're just kind of like in awe sometimes of like, wow, they're just really like, they they'll talk about Automatic or they'll talk about whoever, and they tend to do it pretty freely. And, like on our side, I think the way we just figured it was just like, oh, let's just keep things, just positive and cover news and tutorials and stuff like that. And I think over the years we've also kind of searched for what is our niche. If it's not going to be the place you go for like drama, because it's inherently drama free on our site, what are we trying to do? And we've kind of struggled that throughout the years of like, we'll be the community place where you can find how was WordCamp and like see photos and stuff like that, or it's tutorials and stuff like that. We are still always kind of like looking for that, but the one thing that I don't think we're even good at it in general, like to be drama, right, to do that stuff. We're just so like, we're not so good at like writing the tweets that get people's attentions and stuff like that, and in terms of that, so we're kind of in awe when other places do that, but that's not our specialty. We just kind of like keep things like announcements and tutorials and things like that, and hopefully more of a educational resource, I think, is kind of currently our goal.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the McElroy brothers? They do My Brother and Me. They do a bunch of different podcasts. They have a rule on their podcast: no bummers. Like they do a question and answer. That's what My Brother and Me is, for anyone who's listening or watching who's not familiar. And they really they won't answer like a bummer question. And it seems like, I mean, without even knowing about it, that Torque has like implemented the no bummers rule, where it's just like, hey, we're going to talk about stuff, we're going to cover things, but we're going to try to keep it positive. And I think that kind of speaks to the longevity of Torque and keeping that going, because if a lot of other folks, like, companies might try to throw a publication out, like Tucker was talking about earlier, and let's just shoehorn our thing into there. Let's promote our products in there. I can think of one off the top of my head that is still actually pretty active, but they're always promoting their own very large fleet of products, and they it's so weird where it's like, oh, what's the number one form plugin? Oh, it's the one you guys have, and just having that whole thing on your end, and being much more, and trying to be much more neutral about that, and understanding that your reputation can take a hit when it comes to things like this. I think that's really great. I remember I was at WP Engine when Torque first spun up, and it kind of it's gone a little bit more from. I remember a lot of those early posts were in the same vein, but just a lot of like technical tutorials, things like that. Things that got engagement. I've just really, as I've seen Torque like grow and come into its own over the past few years, I think honestly, like, yeah, of course you guys are still getting traffic and everything, but I think it kind of gets slept on a little bit. I think that people, some people do like to get caught up in the drama and get caught up in that, but I think that that's a great message to be like, hey man, we're just trying to keep it positive. We're just and we're trying to keep the voice of the company that pays the bills like out of the way for the most part. So
which I'd imagine has to be kind of tricky when you have to essentially talk about the competition. Now that's Torque is owned by a web hosting company, and other web hosting companies now own other WordPress products that are not web hosting companies, but rather actual like plugins and SaaS products and all that sort of thing. So you almost have to get really good at being able to talk about anything, even a competitor's product, because we look at it as just a product, but from the marketing side of each of one of these companies, they're looking at it as like, our competition has a rival form plugin. We're just going to use form plugins as our generic here, a rival form plugin. And, oh, we can't talk about the rival form plugin. And you're looking at it, well, they just came out this really cool feature. It sounds great. I want to talk about it. And you just talk about it. And I think having the ability to have that separation between the brand or the parent brand and your ability to just talk about whatever you want, I think that's really cool. And it sounds like a great way to do that if you're essentially sponsored by the company but not fully influenced by the company. How do you feel about that when you're doing that?
Well, I was just going to say, for better or worse, it seems like a lot of these really useful plugins and tools are becoming part of bigger brands. Oftentimes, those are going to be hosting, but not always. I mean, we're seeing some get eaten up by like theme sites or whatever. But like eaten up, that's a bad word, because it's they're getting health employment. They're getting benefits. They're like in a way, it's kind of maybe better for the ecosystem, but it's harder to avoid that as things go on. If something cool comes out, it's probably under a technical competitor. And I have always come from before I was working for Torque, I was working for a couple Y Combinator companies, and they were just always into like this not frenemies, like cooperation was a huge thing. Like there was never, you could be, like as a literal example, we had an app that I worked for that allowed you to send postcards from photos on your phone, like take an Instagram photo, send it as a postcard. This was like 15 years ago, kind of early days of Instagram. And as part of covering the content for that and like doing photo walks and promoting that, my employers were like, hey, these other guys are doing the exact same thing we are. Let's team up and let's do this stuff. And I really like that. And so that's definitely been a vibe that I've gotten since I've been, working in tech, is that, you can always kind of work together, and, it's not going to look bad. It's not going to be weird. So it's really there's never any time where I'm like censoring myself, like, oh, do we talk to these people because they're owned by, this other company? However, I think that in the WordPress space, and maybe it's just like in different like careers, maybe in like sales or something like that in the space, some of those people do like get shocked when they're finding out that they're talking to me, like oh, Torque is owned by WP Engine. I don't think I can talk to you. And that's never been a thing that's ever kind of come up on my side. And in other careers I've had doing this exact same stuff, I've never had someone say like, oh, I can't talk to you because you work for a competitor. And that's only happened a bit, but it is weird when that happens. But as far as like us covering stuff, I mean, that's just the way things are going to be. Things are every new thing that seems like it's going to eventually kind of work for one of these fewer and fewer companies at the top. And that's not going to stop the way that we cover or think about things.
You would also not have anything to talk about if you couldn't talk about a competitor.
Yeah.
You're like, so Contact Form 7 just came out with a really cool feature, like that would be, you wouldn't have anybody else to talk about, that, I don't know, that would make the ecosystem a very boring place to cover, and the community at large just not being able to cover any of that sort of thing.
And no one's ever asked us to do anything either. I want to say that too. It's been super easy for me, and it's easy for me to say like, oh, just don't worry about that. But that's largely because of, we have these kind of like firewalls in place or whatever, where no one's ever said, hey, you can't cover that. And so
that's
on my mind.
That's super apparent from just reading your content. It's very apparent that they're not approaching you saying, hey, we have this new thing that just came out. I want you to go cover it. Go write 300 words about it or 1,000 words about it or whatever. Cosper, you were about to say something. Sorry about that.
No, so I mean, even with all of these different plugins, themes, etc., getting kind of rolled into the competition, rolled into things like that. I mean, just generally, both hosting companies and some other plugin companies have just been like on acquisition sprees lately. But I think, I know that Torque has been doing this for like several years now. Every March, to coincide with March Madness, y'all do Plugin Madness, and I'm sure that is a time of year for you where you're just like, because everything is, you're having multiple tiers of voting and all this other stuff, but I'd really kind of be interested to hear a little bit on how you organize Plugin Madness every year, because I know you post content, I know that you host shows, but Plugin Madness is kind of its own unique thing in the WordPress world. And before Twitter started to blow itself up, I mean, every year, you follow enough WordPress people, and in your timeline, it's just Plugin Madness, Plugin Madness, Plugin Madness. So.
Yeah, so Plugin Madness, I think we started 5 years ago. This year, I think is going to be our 6th year, 2023. And what we do is in February, we open it up to nominations. And oftentimes we'll get about 200 or 300 nominations and a lot of duplicates within those. And sometimes the nomination suggestion is also the same URL email as the thing they're nominating, right? Which is totally fine. Like I think we should be fine promoting ourselves and bragging about ourselves if we're proud of stuff. But for the most part, like it's been a good way to kind of get the goal is to get underdogs some representation, and they might not make it to the final round, but it just being in there and just kind of being in the marketing section or in the e-commerce section might help them out. So once we get those nominations, Emily and I go through and we try to make sure they meet some qualifications. Have they been updated within like the last year? Do they have more than 1,000 installs or 10,000 active installs or whatever? Like we'll have like certain rules that we do just to kind of weed out stuff that unfortunately might weed out some very, very new competitors. And we try to keep in mind that like some folks getting started could really use the advertisement, and they are kind of genuine good products. But we try to set some standards. And then each week in March, I'm not sure when we're starting next year, but sometime in March, we start with 32 rounds of 64 competitors. And then the next week we have it, and we have it, and we have it. And we were using a bracket style tournament service before, and this year we're actually going to be using a WordPress plugin that does this. So we're nervous, excited about that. It is kind of nice that, like, you know, pay people some money and make sure things go right, but like it is also kind of cool to like eat the dog food and try doing it entirely in WordPress. And yeah, by the end, we start off with like kind of these broad sections, and this is actually one of the parts that people really struggle with the most with Plugin Madness, is that we have these like 4 categories of like e-commerce and marketing and maintenance and optimization. And in the beginning, you can kind of like, okay, these 2 are kind of similar, these 2 are kind of similar. But as weeks go on, sometimes you're like, why is this form builder up against you know, an optimization thing or whatever? And people just don't seem to understand how brackets work and how we can't, like, you know, shape that, right? We don't want to, like, you know, manually go through and put things to each other. We kind of let the voting happen. But yeah, the best part for me is that final 4, where we have the best e-commerce and the best optimization and the best maintenance and the best marketing, you know, kind of going up to head. Because in a way, that's sort of like first in their class. And just like a personal highlight for me over the years of doing this is, like, I actually have found plugins that I never heard of that, like, totally, like, there was one post duplicator, and I think now there's like maybe 3 post duplicators. Yoast has a post duplicator, but like 5 years ago, I write a weekly segment for Torque, and every single time I'm like, God, I wish there was a way to just duplicate this and then just update these few things. And I found one through Plugin Madness. So like, that's, to me, that's my favorite moment of Plugin Madness, is just like
that was the MVP.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't win. They didn't make it, like, I don't think they made it to the second round, you know, because they're kind of unknown, and it does kind of, popularity does have to come into it at a certain part, like near the end especially. But yeah, it did put them in front of me, and hopefully other people learn about some of these small plugins as they're kind of going and voting.
So Cosper, could we do a fantasy football for plugins?
I would have to think about how that
would it be just a bunch of like you have to build your own web hosting company, and then you have to go out and try to find all the plugins that you're gonna to acquire, and then just line them up, and then whoever wins Doc's March Madness, that's it. That's how it works.
In the beginning, we did have people who were like writing forecasts. And I really wish we knew how to work with that more. But in the beginning, we had people who are like, here's my predictions for round 3. And yeah, oh, that was super fun. Like, gosh, I hope that happens again.
Yeah, I would say not fantasy football, but just even filling out just your own bracket. Like, here's like that's a tradition during like a March Madness style thing. It's just like, here's what my favorites are. That was something I participated in at a few workplaces. Was like, okay, give us your March Madness picks, and if you're good on this, like, you win the pot. Like the basically the person that like called it all the way down to the team that took it, you win the pot. And of course, like, money doesn't need to be involved, but just filling out brackets and being able to be like, I was right. Like, I know that there are plenty of people in the WordPress community who just want to hear that they're right. So
just make everybody put a banner on the top of their website that has to link to yours for 6 months, and that's bragging rights right there.
Right. Oh man. Yeah,
that's cool, man. That's really cool to have those sorts of things. You know, I was just looking through your site and some of the stuff that you folks have done over the years, and just trying to make, like, I don't know, it's like you're adding more to and using things that are outside of the norm. Like, I'm looking at like Torque Tunes, for instance. Like, these are things that are just like outside that no one else is doing, but you're doing them, and it's just like another thing to add to just the cool collection of stuff that could show up on your, on your site, and people are going to link to it and they're going to love it. And it's, I don't know, it's cool. I love that you guys have, all of these different pieces that are all tied together, and just kind of making it so you have more content that's unique in this space.
Torque Tunes was suggested by one of our readers. They were like, "Hey, you should have editorial cartoons." And I draw cartoons, so like, yeah, that was a fun thing we got to do. And a lot of the things that we do, we're given a lot of flexibility. Like like I said before, I was going to WordCamps and covering interviewing people. And on top of that, I might get to make a fun video when, WordPress has a big anniversary or some big milestone. I might get to make like a 30-second video that we put on Twitter or something like that. It's been super, super fun for like a creative person that just dabbles in everything to be like, one of two people working for this magazine and given a chance to like, oh, draw some tunes. Hey, make these videos. Hey, write a song for this. I'm super lucky.
This is awesome. This is awesome. Good job, Doc. I love it.
Thank you.
So how would you describe this to someone who does this type of work for someplace else? How would you tell them to approach either management or the editor or whoever, just saying like, I have this really cool talent. I play the ukulele. I want to like write songs about like the thing. Like how would you like explain that to someone in order to approach their management to say, I want to do this kind of off the wall thing, yet I'll totally tie it into what it is that we're doing here?
A large part of it for me has come down to just luck that, the managers at a company might be like, oh, this looks fun. Like this looks like it could work for us. And I think a lot of companies have those sort of people, and a lot of companies might have people that are like, oh, that doesn't make sense. That's not on our, list of things. So it doesn't really make sense. So a part of it could just come down to luck, but, a large part of it comes down to company culture. And hopefully if your company culture is pretty awesome, then all you would need to do is occasionally be like, hey, I'd like to do some stuff for this. We had people on our marketing team at WP Engine that were really into stop motion animation or something. And so they would kind of find the right people. For us, a lot of that would be maybe internally. We have a lot of it's a large company. We have our own internal marketing, where we're doing videos for ourselves that we watch every Thursday for like town halls or whatever. And so that's kind of a place where people might be like, oh, I saw this person wrote a song for town hall. I'd like to do the same thing. So, luck does come down to it that I'm lucky to work for a company that seems to make it very easy to be able to contribute that stuff. And then on top of that, if you don't have that job to start with, you could just kind of like try offering to contribute things like that. Probably internally, if you're in a large company, the internal marketing maybe is the easiest way to kind of, because they're always looking for free labor, like for people who are like, and they don't care as much. And on that side, they're not going to care as much about like, how does this ukulele singing go with our product, outside, right? So it's a good chance to kind of like test the market and kind of do stuff. And if you do it that way, working internally and doing stuff that people don't really care if it gets shown outward too much, then occasionally they might start using you. They might be like, oh, this is actually a really cool direction. Let's embrace this more.
Yeah. I mean, the intranet always needs news too,
Mm-hmm.
like that sort of thing. Matt, I know we're gonna wrap up here in just a moment, but like Matt himself, Matt Mullenweg used to do, and he probably still does these, but the what's in my bag sort of situation, where it's just like Matt's known for traveling, and so he would go and write stuff about what he puts in his bag. Now, mind you, most of the things are like way out of like my price range. I'm not going to spend $900 on a toothbrush, but he has those things where he kind of collects them and does them. I was looking on your guys' site, and you did one recently where it was like, your WordCamp travel tip of like, take these and don't take these. Like, those are just like things that are just, it's just enough to kind of just show that there's like fun stuff that you could talk about and be relatable, and that someone is going to end up looking for a travel tip on WordCamp, and they're going to find your content, which ended up being funny, but it was cool. It's like I don't know, find those sorts of like creative ways of kind of tying in the brand with, you know, what it is that people are either looking for or would just think is a fun thing to see.
Yeah. Don't bring your trumpet to WordCamp US. You're not going to do that. That's a lesson I learned the hard way after years of going to WordCamps. Let me tell you, you're not going to use that bugle as often as you think you
are. Right. Well, Doc, thank you very much for coming and hanging out with us. We really appreciate it. We'll have links to all your stuff in our show notes, so feel free to go take a look at that over there. Doc, where can people find more about you and just like all the fun adventures that you've been up to?
Like my personal stuff is all on docpop.org. docpop.org. I couldn't get that .com handle, but yeah, you can go to the about section there and you'll see links to my Mastodon and YouTube and everything else on there. And then Torque on Twitter is the Torque Mag, at the Torque Mag. Again, we couldn't get Torque Mag, but at the Torque Mag, which makes us more definitive.
Perfect. Well, hey, thank you very much for hanging out. You have a good one. See y'all later. Here's our outro. So streaming over on the Fediverse as well, so feel free to go take a look at that. We have links in all of our stuff over in our show notes. Thank you very much, Doc, for hanging out with us. Talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.